We need to talk about, obviously Black Rainbow. I remember seeing New York Transit Queen and just thinking straight away, oh my God, this is so cool. Like seeing the video clip and then hearing the music and knowing your history, I knew sort of straight away how freeing and I guess exciting this direction for you must have been. I think I wanted to find out about, for you, having that chaos, having that energy, just getting it all out. That first moment that you were like, oh my God, I need to do this, and you finally release it and people respond, how that felt.
It felt amazing to get such positive reception for the record, but I really enjoyed making it as well because it is all in response to this building, the Stony Island Arts Bank in Chicago. So it's all these archives, and I didn't set out to make a record, I just went there as a tourist. So to actually be there and, hold a black doll from the early 1900s, or to hold a newspaper from 1850, or to look at a magazine from the 50s, and like all of these things there, the history is past, but of course it isn't past, and in some cases it's just elegant and needs celebrating and inspiring. In other cases the history is really painful and it's complex and entangled, but with everything I felt like the object's moment isn't over and they have something to tell us. So that it felt really good writing songs and responding to each object with music and not thinking about genre at all. So I think with that New York Transit Queen picture, she just looks like such a hellraiser, and it really reminded me of those 50s kind of the Riot Girl posters that we saw, which were 50s images kind of reworked, satirized for the 90s feminism. So it's like a lot of different kind of lenses, but yeah, I really enjoyed getting back to like playing electric guitar and jumping around and feeling really free. And this record was a side project to me, so I felt really free going into it, and I didn't feel like I had to maintain what my expectations are of what other people's expectations might be, which of course is so circular anyway.
That's something that resonated straight away. I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder the process of getting to this point to feel like you're allowed to do this. Like, I think even as a broadcaster, as a music fan, as a brown woman, there's assumptions straight away of what I love and what I enjoy. And I thought, far out, as a musician, it must be the same for you. Starting off in a certain area, even though you have this history of indie music, and then coming to it and people being surprised or maybe challenging you on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like people who really know my music or really know me listen to this record and say, oh, this is just so you. Like, it has this cosmic jazz stuff for which you like, and it has this squelchy weird funk stuff that you like, and it has this elegiac piano sort of, dramatic stuff, and indie, as you say, and this punk stuff. Like, it's all, I love it all, and I just feel like there's too much great music to only stay in sort of one lane. And I also think as an artist it's really important to kind of sort of push it as though you're in a plaster cast, right? It's like before it sets, it's really important to kind of make yourself as much space as possible, because you have to be able to sort of maneuver within this thing. And I just thought, this, it's my fourth record, as when I eventually decided it wasn't going to be a side project, which is only when I saw the artwork. Then I thought, I've worked on this for so many years, I really want to claim it as my own thing. This has been my obsession for all these years. So,
what about the artwork was like, okay, this makes sense?
The artwork, well, the photography is Koto Bolofo, who I've wanted to work with for years. He's a South African photographer. He does a lot of fashion, and he also does stuff in archive, like books about Hermès and the Atelier and the stuff. It's just all good. He's a beautiful photographer. And I thought, we just started talking on, what was it, Instagram instant message or whatever it's called. I had reached out to him, but he didn't know it was really me, and I didn't know it was really him. And then we just, I remember being on holiday and was like, it's really Koto. And he's really an exceptional photographer, and he came to do this project, and we didn't have a kind of Harper's Bazaar, budget, but he really believed in it, so that was really amazing. And then the photos were really classic. And then the record was kind of like, had all this thrashy, trashy stuff on it. But then Manu Shribley, the graph writer and art director, he came in and he just kind of flipped it for me. He took the classic photographs and he brought his kind of punk energy to it. I saw his work on the front of a skateboard magazine. Yeah. And then so together, I mean, I just love what they came up with. Every time I've just signed loads of copies of the record. Every time I see it, I think, I love this. I love it so much.
So proud of it. Yeah.
But also I think it's funny when you're an artist and you work with a logo, it's almost as though your own name, you know, if you don't choose a pretend name like Florence and the Machine as a band, but it's really her, if you use your own name, after a while you start seeing it in print in a certain kind of writing, and it sort of sets in a logo, and it gets further away from who you really are, because you're still moving. And then to see the way he'd written this kind of loopy and square, I was like, yeah, that is me at this point. So it kind of changed my relationship with my own name and identity. So he did something amazing in that.
It seems like a lot of these relationships externally have really inspired you and made you feel in your own head like, oh, this is right, I'm able to do this and go in this direction. I also found it quite interesting that you've said a lot about leaning into your intuition. So many artists say that, but how did you actually do it? Were it these conversations that you were having? Was it just the art itself that was so moving that you're like, I can't deny that? Like, what particular moments do you remember being like, oh, I have to trust this gut feeling?
I think a lot of it was those feelings, but a lot of it was being, you know, guided and shown. You know, Theaster Gates is the artist who saved the Arts Bank from demolition. You know, he would walk past it on the south side of Chicago and say, we don't want another building pulled down in this neighborhood. And he bought it from the city for $1, and he raised millions of dollars through selling his own art to save this building. So he's a curator of this building, right? So he managed to get all the Frankie Knuckles records. So it's full of like the history of Chicago house. It's got all the glass slides from the University of Chicago when they were going to throw them out when they were digitizing their archive. It's all these difficult and problematic objects from America's past that Theaster was entrusted by the family of Ed Williams, who collected these objects, these 4,000 objects, and then it's these 26,000 books from the Johnson Publishing Company. So I think it's because Theaster is an artist and he has a real care over these black things and he really values them. I think that sort of seeing how he had housed these things and how they were treated and presented and how he would sort of riff with them and be inspired by them, and just the way he showed me around, I just caught this kind of excitement. And, you know, being around him, you know, he's a visual artist, but he also has a band, the Black Monks of Mississippi, who sing in the Black Pentatonic, and it's art music. You know, some of their songs have got one word, and it might last 25 minutes, you know. And so sort of seeing these are the different things you can do in performance. You know, you could just stand at the front and sing one song for an hour, or everything could be completely improvisational, or you could have someone playing tiny cymbals and a trumpet and throwing some drums on the floor. You know, the black avant-garde, which I guess I had known so much about white avant-garde music and, you know, Velvet Underground and bands that I really like, but I didn't know there was this kind of whole history of contemporary art, black abstraction, black avant-garde. So when I got into that, I thought, oh, there's loads more room. Your music isn't just to be entertaining. Of course you want to connect, and I really do. I don't want it to just be indulgent, but I want to step into this tradition of people feeling free.
That's so magical to have all of that space, and I think some of that delicacy and excitement comes through on your track Red Horse. I think it's really beautiful because it feels like you're writing this sort of like love letter and a bit of a camaraderie, like we could be friends and it would be so special. There's that tone in it.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to know what you get from weaving in those stories and sort of writing to these characters in art pieces during the record.
I think I got a lot out of it because it was really nice to a certain extent, step outside of myself. But of course, in doing that, you're only really yourself. So I felt, you know, the objects I was drawn to there were a lot of women's stories, there were a lot of girlhood stories, there were obviously a lot of black stories. So I was sort of looking in all the while that I was looking out as well. But it felt really nice to be able to tell other people's stories. You know, in the case of Harriet Jacobs, her story, her life is so much larger and bigger and more dramatic and episodic than my own life. And just to sort of inhabit a woman who has this bravery, even as a teenager, has this kind of steely confidence, has this imagination and belief, and, you know, and her story is well known in a lot of places in America, but in a lot of places it's still not very well known. Her autobiography was discredited. It was thought that it was written by a white woman. It was thought that it was written by the white woman who edited the book. People, after a while, said, oh, perhaps she didn't write this, perhaps this is fiction. And it was the work of a professor at Yale, Jean Fagan Yellen, who was able to corroborate the story of incidents in the life of a slave girl and say, I mean, it was so convenient. The father of her children went on to be a well-known politician. So we see his papers, we see where he was at different times, we see him being able to purchase his children, which is what he does. That's how they come to safety in the end. And so yeah, that brought her back into ascendance. And lots of people have done work on Harriet Jacobs, and especially at the Venice Biennale. But I still find when I'm talking in shows, a lot of people don't know her story. So it feels good to be able to be inside other people's stories instead of just my own, for this record.
Last night, over and over, I just had one of your tracks in my head. Put Your Records On. I don't know if sometimes when you go to sleep, you have a particular track that just plays over and over.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I just remembered being a preteen and hearing that everywhere and thinking, wow, that's so special, the calmness that you put into that track.
Oh, thank you.
It's so beautiful to reflect on that even in my musical history, I think, with now listening to this new record from you. I wanted to know, obviously that's more of a comment, but coming into this next stage of your career, what did you want to do next? Like, you always have that sort of ability to speak to all of these people listening to the records and finding comfort in that. How are you going to do it the next time?
Well, I mean, I love today, and I love seeing, and Friday as well. I was so surprised by how many young people were there. I didn't know it was such a young festival. I don't know if that, speaking about Put Your Records On, I feel like a lot of younger people have come to the song through it being covered, which I was so grateful, for that version and being in TikTok. And, so sometimes I'll see someone at the show and think, they definitely weren't even alive when this record came out, but they might have come to it through a film or through a TV show or through, just through other people covering the record. So I think I definitely don't know what I'm going to do next, but I feel like I feel really free, and I think that's important, to just go into everything with your eyes sort of open and your ears open, in wonder. I'm not a sort of trained musician. I'm not a kind of I don't have a bag of tricks. I have to really feel it, and sometimes it takes me a long time to make records. I hope my next one doesn't take as long, but I don't know. Sometimes these things happen in that way, but I love it. That's the thing. I really like writing. I really like producing. I really like arranging. All of the stuff around it. So I'm never thinking, I just want to get back on stage, give me anything, let me find some songwriters to do it for me and find a producer to make me a product. Some people, that's why we keep we see them every 18 months because they have a big team. But I feel like so much of that work is the fun, so I like to do it, but it takes me a while. But yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do next at all. But I'm glad you Put Your Records On, and thank you for saying it as calmness. I feel like I know what you mean in that, and I do. That was always an important thing for me in music, that sort of stillness. I felt there were certain expectations about, what kind of music, people who looked like me at that particular moment in, 2006 or 2005 when I wrote it. There was a lot of, it was like the pastoral, the gentle, the internal. It wasn't so kind of celebrated, and I really wanted to bring that to that song.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me and for sharing your music, and also giving a bit of a guide to other artists on how to do all of these broad versions of creativity. Thanks.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you.